I'm Lee Spencer with the RacinBoys, and I caught up with Doug Yates at the Ford Performance Center. And, of course, Doug, you oversee the Roush-Yates Engine program, and quite the challenge this year with that 550 target and trying to ease into all of NASCAR's new rules for 2019.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. It is a big challenge for our group at Roush-Yates and Ford Performance. You know, that engine configuration that we're going to run in Atlanta is all different. You know, basically the power range changed from 750 horsepower with that taper spacer to 550 with a new 922 tapered spacer. So, and also at the same time, the RPM range has changed. So last year with those engines, we were at 9,000 RPM. We'll be at 8,500 RPM this year. So what that means is just everything in the engine needs to be retuned for that airflow and that RPM range. So that means intake manifolds, cylinder heads, camshafts, exhaust systems. On top of the fact that the durability cycle, what the drivers are going to do in the cars, they're going to be wide open throttle around these tracks, just like Daytona and Talladega. So the engine's going to see a lot more heat. Different components are going to have more wear than what we're used to in the past. So everybody at Roush-Yates is really digging in and trying to understand that engine, going and running durabilities on our engine dynos there, where we can run race simulations, which is really awesome if fans could imagine running a race on a dyno. But we're working on that, and so far the testing has gone really well. Out in Vegas yesterday, Brad Keselowski was pretty fast, and we're continuing to work on that and can't wait to start the season.
Do you anticipate, I mean, I know you watched the test, I watched the drafting, but the drafting doesn't look like traditional drafting to me, and I discussed this with someone else. It almost looked like the slingshot drafting, but you couldn't slingshot. You couldn't make that move. How do you, make modifications or changes to one area or another of the car to kind of break that pack? I know they want pack, they want side-by-side, but how do you differentiate yourself from the competition?
Yeah, I mean, you win with advantages, and we're always looking for those, but the only real data point we have is the All-Star race last year. So that was a race that we put restrictor plates on these engines, just like we have at Daytona and Talladega, same horsepower range. And we had a lot of success that day with the Roush-Fenway cars were sitting on the front row, which was really, really awesome. And then Kevin Harvick ultimately won the race. And so we had a little bit of insight to what we did there. Basically what we learned is every horsepower means more than it does today. And so, you got to go work on optimizing the engine even more than the current engine, because with the current engine, you're off throttle a lot. So, it's really about the center of the corner speed, and the engine is important, but it's not as important as it's going to be going forward, as well as the aerodynamics. So the challenge for the teams are how much downforce do they want in the car, or how trimmed out do they want the car. So are they setting the car up for short run speed and just having the slickest car possible, and then giving up handling 20 laps when the tires wear off? It depends on what track we're at. Or are they going to put downforce in the car and bet on that long run? So I think the beginning of the year is going to be very interesting, because there's going to be so many different approaches to it. And then ultimately it'll probably start converging on what the best way to go is. But I think strategy is going to be a big player this year, fuel economy, pit windows. So the storylines are going to change from where they were last year. And especially at the beginning of the year, it's going to be interesting to see who has really done their homework and who gets an advantage. And for us to have the new Ford Mustang and to have the great teams we have with Team Penske and Stuart Haas and Roush-Fenway and Front Row Motorsports, I like our chances, and I can't wait to get the season started.
When they started the test yesterday, the Xfinity cars were faster than the Cup cars. What changes do you think we're going to see so the reverse happens? I know at the end of the day the Cup cars were faster, but what changes can NASCAR make to ensure that the NASCAR Cup Series remains the premier series?
Yeah, I think, Steve O'Donnell and his team have done a lot of work on trying to figure out what a great package will be when we go to these mile-and-a-half tracks, and that's what we're going to end up racing with the new Taper 550 engine package in the car. But at the same time, the Xfinity cars have more power than the Cup cars will on that weekend. So the Xfinity guys will have about 700 horsepower. The Cup guys will have about 550. And I think over time, we'll see how this package works out, and perhaps the Xfinity Series could go something to a package similar to what the Cup guys have next year. So all of this is a work in progress. I know we'll hear a lot about that, but really racing is racing, and when you line them up and you see the driver talent and the cars and the teams, that's what everybody's there to see. Is not who has the most power. It's just who puts on the best race, and who gets an advantage, and which one of your drivers is going to win that day. And that's what we all race for, and that's why we're here.
It's still hard to swallow for a guy who's worked his entire life trying to get to horsepower, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. Back when my dad and I started this in 1990, those engines made about 650 horsepower unrestricted. And then through many, many years, until about 3 years ago, they were making about 925 horsepower. With the same cubic inches, the compression ratio was unlimited when I started. Now we have a 12-to-1 compression ratio limit, and we were turning more RPM than we were. So it was really great to see all those advancements. When we first made 700 horsepower on the dyno, and when we made 800, and when we made 900, those were all great achievements. But, racing engines, of course, I would love to just be unlimited, but it's unrealistic. These cars and these teams are so good today. If we had 900 horsepower at Daytona, we would probably have a big mess on our hands. But it's the best part about NASCAR, the way I like to look at it, is I love engines, and I love working on engines, but I love competing in the series. And that's really how I look at it, is it's competition. It's not just about horsepower. It's about competing and getting to compete with the Ford Motor Company against Toyota and Chevrolet and all these great teams is what I get excited about. And ultimately that's what we all do and why we're all here.
Can you give us a Reader's Digest version of the rules NASCAR has in place for cost containment when it comes to repurposing your engines?
Yes, so last year, Andy Graves and Jeff Andrews and Richie Gilmore and myself worked with Mike Helton and Steve O'Donnell and his team to try to come up with ways to save money for our teams that didn't affect the racing and were just smart. And so we all got together and said, what, the bottom end components can run more than one race. Why don't we implement a rule that says you have to run the short block 2 races? And that's what we did last year, and it was a really good rule. We had 13 sealed short blocks last year. We passed that savings on to our team. The teams were very excited about that because we live in a world that, it's really, with all the tools you have with CFD and wind tunnels and dynos, we've got to be more cost. We've got to really be smarter about saving money because some of the things we do don't change the competition. So we decided to implement that last year. It worked really well. We've extended that into this year where we're going to have some sealed long blocks the second half of the year with the Taper 550 package. And ultimately what that does is set us up for running these engines longer into the future in 2020 and beyond. So that's just smart business. And as an engine builder, it was a really interesting challenge because you still want to optimize the engine for every single racetrack. And so in some ways, we raced harder internally trying to make sure that we had the right package for the right track. And I feel like we did a great job at it. Everybody at Roush-Yates did a great job of keeping up with the seals, trying to understand what you could change on the engines. So since the short block was sealed, you could still change the cylinder heads, you could still change the manifold, you can still change the exhaust system. So we were still racing. We just ran those parts longer, and in a lot of ways it was stressful for all the guys in the shop, but it was kind of fun because it was a new challenge for us.
When we think of Daytona, we think a lot about you and your dad and the success the Yates family has had at Daytona, and particularly in the Daytona 500. Why is that race just ultimately so special to you and the Yates family?
It's a bit hard to describe, but growing up, my dad always put a lot of effort into the Daytona 500. It is NASCAR's Super Bowl. And it's the France family's jewel racetrack. I mean, and you have 2 months to prepare for the race. So being the first race of the year, being the Daytona 500, being the Super Bowl, you always want to put a lot of effort into it. And you always, in the winter, we would just take the clocks off the wall and lock ourselves into the building until we came up with advantages. And so when I graduated college in 1990, my first job was to work on restrictor plate engines, and back then everybody just took their short track engine and raced it at Daytona. And so they gave me that challenge, and and through lots of testing and development, the very first time that I had a part of that was 1991, and we sat on the pole with Davey Allison. And so right away, I got a taste of what it meant, how special it was to be at Daytona. And then the very next year, we won the Daytona 500 in 1992 with Davey. And to see him go in the Hall of Fame tonight, and I'm sure those moments are going to be up on the screen, and thinking about that race and that day and how great a job he did, how awesome of a driver he was, and how hard that we worked to do that. But my dad and I won 3 Daytona 500s together, 92 with Davey and 96 and 2000 with Dale Jarrett. And then in total, with Roush-Yates' involvement, we ultimately won Jack's first Daytona 500 in 2009 with Matt Kenseth, which was really special because Jack didn't really like Daytona. He hadn't had a lot of success there in a NASCAR Cup car. And since then, we've won 8 in total. And it's just something that for me, it kind of it's the biggest thing in my professional career is Daytona, and I want to go down there every year and win the race or compete for the win. And it's hard to express how much it means to me personally, that race. And when I pull in the tunnel there and I see the track and hear the noise, that's really why I personally do this, is because I told them if they changed it where you couldn't compete there, I don't know that I would even race NASCAR, because it means that much to me.
You mentioned Davey, and what do you think his potential might have been, because he was taken from us so young?
Davey Allison, first of all, there wouldn't have been a Robert Yates Racing without Davey Allison. When my dad had the opportunity to buy the team from Harry Renier and JT Lundy, he wasn't sure he wanted to do that. He didn't race to be a team owner. But Davey told my dad, he said, "Robert, if you do this," he said, "you can do this, and if you do it, I will never leave you." And that gave my dad the confidence to buy the team. But early on, you could see Davey Allison was a star. I mean, it wasn't not only his ability to drive a race car and understand what a car needed to go fast and to put it in victory lane, but it was his charisma, and it was just that feeling that there's certain people that you're around that you just want to be around, and people are attracted to, and people love and admire and just celebrate. And that was Davey Allison, and everything he touched was special. Whether it was his cowboy hat with the dust on it, or his smile, or the way he would, if he was really good in practice, he would get out and work on his seat and stop practice early because he knew he was good. But the way he treated people, he was great. Drivers are leaders of people, and Davey Allison was a leader of people. He was a leader of our team. At his service in his hometown, I'll never forget riding the bus and people lining the streets, lining the highway, banners, and people that followed him. It was truly amazing what he meant to people in a very short period of time. And I can only imagine, and we can only project what that could have been. I mean, obviously, we would all like to think that we were one race away from winning the championship in 1992. He was going to compete for championships. He was going to give Dale Earnhardt a run for his money, and who knows what it would have been. But God had a plan for Davey, and it was different than what we would all like to see. But God's plan for Davey was to make an impact, and tonight we get to celebrate his legacy.
And it says something about the strength of the Yates family, that after such a devastating loss that you all were able to carry on and, build what you did with, further on with Dale Jarrett, and then to see what you have been able to do in your own right. It's a tremendous accomplishment.
Well, thank you, Leah. It was, like I said, it was the credit to Davey to get it started. I mean, he gave my dad the courage and inspiration to buy the team, and that led to the next thing. But it was hard, when he had his accident. We skipped the next race at Pocono, and my dad said, we can't race with tears in our eyes, and it was really hard. But I think that my dad he loved Davey like a son, and he always thought about his contribution to where we were as a team and an organization, and never forgot that. And I wouldn't be here today without Davey Allison. And I'm proud to carry on my dad's legacy with Roush-Yates and the partnership with Jack Roush, which he's just been an amazing guy, really a hero of mine. And when you think about who you admire, I think about my dad and I think about Jack. And I was fortunate to work with both of them, side by side with both of them, and that's priceless. And then to be able to be around Davey Allison, and tonight's Hall of Fame is really going to be special for me because we raced with Alan Kowicki. Alan Kowicki raced our cylinder heads, and we did some work together. And my dad loved Alan Kowicki, and he and Alan he had so much admiration for Alan and what he did, and so it's great to see him in the Hall of Fame. And then as a young kid, I'll never forget delivering a Can-Am engine that my dad built to Roger Penske's shop in Reading, Pennsylvania, and seeing their Indy cars and the dyno, and just thinking about, man, that guy, has it together. Roger Penske, the captain, and all the great things that he's built, and to be able to build his engines. And ultimately, he doesn't give respect. You have to earn it. And I think that the proudest moment for me personally at the banquet was when Roger Penske gave me credit and mentioned my name. And I think that validated the fact that I've earned his respect and want to have to earn it every day and want to keep that up. But that was a really special. So to see him in the Hall of Fame tonight, it's just, it's going to be a really special moment. And looking forward to it.
Speaking of one last champion, Donnie Schatz, you were helpful in developing a 410 engine for sprint cars. What were the challenges, and what do you anticipate from Tony Stewart Racing this year?
Well, it's great to see. First of all, it was great to see Tony Stewart in a Ford when Stuart Haas took the leap and changed the Ford Motor Company year before last, and now to have Tony's sprint car with a Ford engine in it is the way it should have been to start with. But it takes time to develop those things. The project to build the 410 was really a combination of Tony's desire to have a great engine, Ford's contribution they wanted to make sure Tony's car had a Ford engine in it, so they were part of the project. Andy Durham Racing Engines, who's going to build the engines. Andy used to work for us, and he started his own engine company, which he's done a great job. And then the design team at Roush-Yates that's helped design the components to get it together. So it's really been a collaboration. And then Ron Shaver for dyno in the engine and helping out. So grassroots racing engines, I have so much respect for those engine builders because you have to live that 24/7. There's not a NASCAR engine builder I know that can just go run a dirt track or a sprint car race that can go beat those guys. They are the best at what they do, and I give them a lot of respect. And so we knew that would be a tall order for us, and we just wanted to be part of the project with Ford and Tony and Andy, and that's what we did. And I can't wait to see that engine on the track this year because it really is off to a great start. And the first dyno pulls exceeded expectations, and I'm sure with Tony's team being as good as they are, we're going to go win a lot of races with it. So it's an exciting time, and it's an exciting time to be Ford. Everything that Ford Motor Company is involved with today is first class. You can see Edsel Ford's commitment to racing is second to none, and it's a good moment for Ford.
One last question, and we've talked about this before, but do you ever see yourself in a team ownership role?
I think for the longest time, the reason why I did the things I did is I was following my dad's footsteps. Whatever my dad did, I had a ton of respect and wanted to make him happy, just like my daughter Olivia is following me. And so I wanted to accomplish what he accomplished. I wanted to sit at the head table. I wanted to be a Cup championship team owner. And I tried that for a little bit, but really I don't race, and you got to take this the right way. I try to compete at a high level. I like to win. I'm not a very good loser. Racing is a love-hate sport because you lose more than you win, and that drives me to be the best. And if there was an opportunity where I felt like I could put myself in position through hard work and dedication to achieve that, championship level car owner status, I would probably entertain that. But the economic climate of owning a team is tough right now, and you see very wealthy guys that invest their heart and soul into this thing, and they have the resources of other revenue streams helping them. So today, I think my best role is to help Ford Motor Company and build great engines and be a great partner. I think when people look at me, they think about Ford, and that really makes me feel good, because I without Edsel Ford and Ford Motor Company, I wouldn't have this opportunity. So that's job one for me. If there was a time down the road where Edsel came to me and said, hey, we want you to help us out in a different capacity, I would. I told him after we won the championship, he really gave me some high praise, and I said, look, as long as you're racing, I'm your guy. And that's whatever they want me to do, I'll do, and hopefully just carry this on to the next generation.
Well, it's great to see you keeping it all in the family, so to speak, and I know you're going to have a good time tonight, and I appreciate your time, and we'll talk down the road.
All right, thanks, Lee. I appreciate all that you do, and I'll see you tonight.